Greetings and thanks for tuning in. I'm Maura Wheeler from Lamoille South Supervisory Union. Welcome to the 6th episode of the PLP Pathways webinar series. I'd like to thank Orca Media for letting us film this show in their studio.
Hi, I'm Don Taylor. I teach middle level language arts and social studies at Main Street Middle School here in Montpelier, and I'm also a contributor to PLP Pathways. Before we get into today's show, we want to make sure you know how to stay connected to PLP Pathways. You can visit our site, follow us on Twitter, and keep tabs on the project through our blog. We also have a YouTube channel where we broadcast not only these short episodes, but also the webinars that we have throughout the year. Today's topic is going to be flexible pathways and how flexible pathways are occurring in classrooms around the state of Vermont as part of Act 77. And just a reminder, PLP Pathways is dealing with or supporting teachers at the grassroots level as they're working through Act 77, including personal learning plans, proficiency-based learning, and flexible pathways. So before we got on the air, we were just having a brief discussion about what flexible pathways looks like and how we define it. And Maura, why don't you explain how you're thinking about flexible pathways, and then I'll talk about how I'm thinking about it and how it looks in the classroom.
So I think when we think about flexible pathways, we have a few different levels and ways that we talk about flexible pathways. The primary thing that I've been really thinking about is thinking about flexible pathways in terms of the high school context, whether it's alternative courses, individualized studies, students really designing their learning opportunities, providing community-based learning, service learning opportunities for students, helping them to truly have multiple pathways towards graduation, and also thinking about the extended learning opportunities that we have. And so those would be sort of the more formalized flexible pathways.
I think it's important too, whenever we talk about flexible pathways, there's this issue of equity, making sure that all students have the opportunity to pursue their education, maybe not in the traditional setting, so something that you're talking about, those extended learning opportunities or work-based learning or community-based learning, those can be pretty formal flexible pathways. As a middle level teacher, I've always believed that flexible pathways should maybe start in the classroom. And so I've designed some curriculum around what I call flexible pathways, where kids can be experiencing some non-traditional educational experiences that then allow them to demonstrate some of the skills that we're teaching and working on in the classroom. And just a couple points I want to make is, number one, this is where the transferable skills can be really beneficial, because a kid can do a service learning project and they can explain and reflect on that and demonstrate their proficiency using the transferable skill language. Another thing I want to point out that's really important is this is where the PLPs really come into play, because the evidence of their learning, while you may not see it in a traditional format like a test or an assessment, it can be in a photograph, a video, an experience that they have outside the classroom that then you can look at and reflect on and talk to the kids through their PLP. So equity, I think, is a really big piece of it. Also, the use of the PLPs. But what I also want to talk about, we were chatting before, and you mentioned about organization and how flexible pathways may become part of the system. Can you talk more about considerations that teachers might want to think about before implementing flexible pathways, or as they implement flexible pathways in their program?
I think at the classroom level, it's really important to try and really look at the schedule and try and identify opportunities and spaces to allow for multiple opportunities and flexible pathways for students. And that can happen within a classroom setting, and it also can really be identifying as a team. Maybe there's a time or a space to provide this opportunity for students. I also think looking ahead, that's where some of the conversations, school redesign conversations can come in. But at the classroom level, really thinking about who are some of those community partners that you can partner with at the classroom level. How can you, even within your school context, who are some support members that might be able to provide alternative experiences for students. And then also, as you were talking about, really encouraging students to curate their learning, both in and out of school, because that's the key, that they might be able to show a skill outside of school based on their participation in an extended learning opportunity, and really honor that at school, and that comes in through the portfolio.
Right, and I think you made a really outstanding point that I want to go back to, and that is a lot of people feel like, or in my experience, that flexible pathways mean we have to organize kids going hither and yon, and how are we going to organize transportation, and all these barriers come up automatically. And one of the things that we've done at our school is invite the community to come in. And this can be as simple as having a panel of just people who work and coming in and asking, what are some of the skills you need as a worker? What do you do? What's interesting to you? How does this tie to your education? And I think that there are a ton of folks and organizations around Vermont that are willing to come into classrooms. And again, that's the equity piece, where it's not just the kid who can get the transportation, but it's everybody is having the opportunity to hear, to experience the different opportunities that are out there. One example is the Vermont Energy Education Program. They have tons of resources for teachers, and they'll come to your school. And once you get involved with just a few key community partners, it can really open up opportunities. So another one in my classroom is the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. We've been working with them on sustainability issues for going on 6 years now. And those community partnerships become very important, and they allow kids to have a real voice in the community. And that's just something to consider for teachers out there. So I think that is just a really good point, is inviting the community in. The other thing I want to touch base on too is that in our last webinar we talked about student negotiated curriculum, and this is a prime area where you can negotiate projects that are maybe community-based or that deal with a real-world problem, and that involve community partners, where the kids can start co-designing or designing their own curriculum, their own projects, and that's where student negotiation can fit in with flexible pathways, can fit in with the PLPs, and I think that teachers need to understand that. The last point I just want to make is there's a lot of people in the state who are looking at these United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Lindsay Hallman, a PLP Pathways contributor, is a leading voice on that. Kate Toland at People's Academy is another leading voice on that. They've developed a sustainability conference. And if you go to that website, it's called The World's Largest Lesson, tons of resources. And so I just think that, flexible pathways, you can get really creative with it, and it doesn't always have to be, we're sending kids out and how do we arrange that. What do you see as some of the other challenges that teachers might have with flexible pathways, or some of the considerations that they might need to think about?
I think when we think about flexible pathways, it can feel like this really large, formal, as you were saying, like trying to schedule, or there's lots of constraints that can come up. But when we think about really honoring the individual learner and helping and encouraging them to find opportunities and creating opportunities for students to really individualize their learning and create those flexible opportunities for students, that really, it just increases the engagement. It really keeps students motivated and focused in school. And so as much as we can create those opportunities and really truly make it a part of the culture of the school, I think that's so important. Yeah,
and I just want to pitch too that it can be a great way for kids to really honor their tradition and culture and growing up in Vermont, and it can be a great way to learn local history. This is a good sort of start to a conversation we're going to continue on Thursday, February 15th. We're going to have our 6th webinar of the year, where we'll be talking about flexible pathways. I'd like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute for supporting this work. I also want to throw in a pitch. If you're a middle level educator, the Middle Grades Institute is happening in the last week of June, I believe, and registration's open for that. There's a ton of great opportunities across the state. And I hope you join us for the webinar. And if you have any more questions, you can contact Maura or myself, or you can visit the PLP Pathways website. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.